When my mother raised her wine glass and smiled proudly at 14 relatives, I expected her annual speech about family. Instead, she pointed at my older sister and said, "One daughter became a respected doctor." Then she turned toward me, laughed, and added, "The other? Well, she's basically our maid." The table exploded with laughter. I stood there holding the serving tray I'd spent 6 hours preparing, feeling every eye on me. I could have walked away. Almost did. But then I calmly put the tray down, looked at every person in that room and said something that erased every smile from their faces. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old, and if you asked my parents to describe me, they'd probably use 3 words: helpful, dependable, and ordinary. Those sound like compliments until you realize they never mention anything else. My older sister Rachel was different. She graduated from medical school, became a respected pediatric surgeon, and collected awards the way most people collected coffee mugs. Every Thanksgiving, my parents displayed her framed certificates on the living room piano as if they were family heirlooms. Nobody ever displayed anything that belonged to me. I never complained. I simply showed up early, tied on an apron, and made sure everyone else enjoyed the holiday. That Thanksgiving was no different. I arrived just after 7 in the morning, long before anyone else. Mom handed me a grocery list before I had even taken my coat off. Turkey's in the fridge. Potatoes need peeling. The dining table still isn't set. Oh, and don't forget to polish the silver. I smiled. Sure. By noon, I'd basted the turkey twice, baked 3 pies, arranged fresh flowers, and transformed the dining room into something that looked like it belonged in a holiday magazine. When Rachel finally arrived around 2, everyone rushed to greet her. There she is. Our brilliant doctor. Mom hugged her first. Dad carried her overnight bag upstairs. My aunt immediately asked medical questions about her knee. Meanwhile, I was carrying 2 roasting pans from the oven. No one even noticed. It wasn't new. Growing up, Rachel received applause for bringing home straight A's. I received chores because I was so responsible. Rachel's graduation was celebrated with a neighborhood party. When I started my own business years later, my parents simply asked if I had considered finding a real career. Eventually, I stopped explaining. The truth was almost impossible to summarize anyway. I owned a luxury home management and private concierge company that served wealthy executives, retired athletes, and families who wanted every detail of their homes professionally managed. People imagined housekeepers. In reality, I managed dozens of employees, multimillion-dollar properties, confidential client schedules, renovations, security coordination, and household operations. Some of my clients trusted me with homes worth more than entire neighborhoods. But I never corrected anyone. Titles impressed people. Results impressed me. Around 4 o'clock, guests began arriving one after another until 14 relatives filled the house with laughter, football conversations, and the smell of roasted turkey. As always, I moved quietly between the kitchen and dining room, refilling drinks, bringing appetizers, and making sure every plate stayed warm. A cousin smiled at me. "Emily, you're so good at this." Before I could answer, my mother laughed. "She's always happiest when she's taking care of everyone." Several people chuckled. I forced a polite smile and carried another serving dish to the table. Dinner was finally ready. 14 people took their seats. The conversation settled. Then my mother slowly stood, lifted her wine glass, smiled proudly around the room, and began introducing her daughters. Mom looked around the table with the proud smile she wore every Thanksgiving. "I just want to say how grateful I am for my family." Everyone lifted their glasses. She turned toward Rachel first. "One daughter became a doctor." The room filled with applause. Dad beamed so proudly that you'd think she'd just won another Nobel Prize. Rachel smiled modestly. "Thanks, Mom." Then Mom's eyes found me. I was standing beside the dining table, still holding the serving tray I'd forgotten to put down. She laughed. "And the other?" She paused long enough for everyone to look at me. "Well, the other is basically our maid." The room exploded with laughter. Even 2 of my cousins nearly spilled their drinks. Dad grinned. "She's certainly had enough practice serving people." More laughter. Someone jokingly raised an empty glass toward me. "Refill over here." Rachel looked uncomfortable, but she didn't say a word. Not one. For a few seconds I simply stood there. The tray suddenly felt heavier than the turkey I'd carried out of the oven. I realized something. Nobody at that table thought my parents had crossed a line. To them it was just another family joke. I slowly walked to the center of the dining room. Without rushing, without sighing, I gently placed the serving tray onto the table. The soft sound of the tray touching the wood somehow quieted the room. I smiled. "Thank you." Several people looked confused. Mom blinked. "For what?" she asked. "For finally being honest." The smiles began fading. I've spent years pretending those jokes didn't matter. I looked around the room. I kept telling myself that one day someone would notice I wasn't just serving dinner. Nobody spoke. So today, thank you. I reached into my purse and unlocked my phone. "You all think I clean houses." I nodded. "You're half right." A few people exchanged amused looks. "I do help manage homes." I tapped my screen. "But I don't work in them." I turned the phone toward the table. "This is Carter Premier Living." Several relatives leaned forward. The homepage showed photographs of luxury estates, private yachts, executive residences, and a team of professionally dressed managers. Pie company. Silence. I opened another page. Our staff. Dozens of employees. Regional supervisors. Operations managers. Licensed specialists. Then another screen. This year's client portfolio. Luxury properties across Chicago, Lake Forest, Naples, and Aspen. Annual revenue figures appeared beneath them. No one laughed anymore. Dad frowned. What is this?" "Pie business." Mom stared at the screen. "You own this." "I founded it 11 years ago." I calmly opened one final document. The payment history. Electronic transfers. Invoices. Receipts. "Recognize this address?" Dad's eyes widened. It was their house. The landscaping renovation. The kitchen remodel. The new roof after the hailstorm. The Thanksgiving catering you've all enjoyed for the last 4 years. I looked at each person sitting around the table. My company quietly paid for every one of them. The room became so silent that I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Then from the far end of the table, my 80-year-old grandfather slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. Grandpa rested both hands on the back of his chair and slowly looked around the table. "I've stayed quiet for years," he said. "But not today." No one interrupted him. He turned toward my parents. "You've spent half of Emily's life comparing her to Rachel." Mom opened her mouth, but Grandpa raised a hand. "No. You're going to listen." The room stayed perfectly still. "You praise one daughter because she heals children." He looked at me and smiled. "You ignore the other because she quietly improves lives without asking for applause." Mom shook her head. "We never meant." "You meant exactly what you said," Grandpa replied calmly. "You introduced your own daughter as a maid in front of 14 people." Dad lowered his eyes. Grandpa continued. "Do any of you know what Emily actually does?" No one answered. "I do." He pointed toward me. 3 years ago, when I needed help selling my house after your grandmother passed away, Emily handled everything." He smiled softly. "She hired contractors, coordinated movers, negotiated with real estate agents, organized every document, and never accepted a single dollar from me." Several relatives looked at me in surprise. "I've also met some of her clients." He paused. "They're CEOs, retired judges, professional athletes, and people whose names you'd recognize immediately." The silence grew heavier. "They trust her because she's honest." He looked directly at my parents. "Not because she has an impressive title." Mom's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know." "You never asked," Grandpa answered. Dad finally spoke. "Emily, why didn't you tell us?" I smiled gently. "Because I wanted parents who were proud of me before they knew how much money I made." No one could look me in the eye. Rachel slowly stood. Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry." Everyone turned toward her. "I should have stopped Mom the moment she called you the maid." She walked over and wrapped her arms around me. I knew those jokes hurt. I hugged her back. "Thank you." Then I looked around the table one final time. I've never cared that Rachel became a doctor. I smiled at my sister. "I'm proud of her." Then my eyes moved to my parents. I only wanted the same respect for choosing a different path. Neither of them spoke. Mom quietly began crying. "I spent years trying to earn your approval," I continued. Today I realized something. I picked up my coat. Respect isn't something children should have to compete for. I walked toward the front door before stopping one last time. Without anger. Without raising my voice. I looked back and said, "Today wasn't the day you lost a maid." A long pause settled over the house. It was the day you lost the daughter who never stopped trying to make this family feel like home. No one followed me outside. 3 months later, Mom called for the first time without asking for a favor. She simply wanted to apologize. Healing didn't happen overnight and it didn't erase the past. But I finally understood something that Thanksgiving taught me. Your worth is never defined by the title someone gives you. It's defined by the character you carry when they get it completely wrong.